All right, guys, welcome back to the Timeless Podcast, hosted by Greaseball and Corey. We just had a big metagame challenge this past weekend, and very, very exciting times. A lot of people trophied, most games ever played. Super, super excited to go through all these stats that Corey has compiled.
Yeah, thanks, Grease. So, like we've done for previous metagame challenges, for fun in the Discord, we went ahead and asked everybody to report their runs as they came in. So, a word of warning with this data. This is data that's riddled with like a lot of sampling bias, and it's very unscientific. This is all self-reported data by people on Discord, but we got a huge sample size compared to before. We had over 2,000 games played, over 500 runs reported, and I can't wait to rip this apart. We also got 49 trophies this time, which is the most that we've ever seen come out of Discord. So what do you want to talk about in the stats first, Grease?
Muxus deck just doing really well this weekend. I think that's kind of the biggest surprise I think we had for the entire weekend, like by far.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can't read into these win rates too much as scientific facts because, like I said, self-reported data a little biased, but you could see the average overall win rate was 76, and most of these top decks cluster around 76 to 77% if you look at Show and Tell, Red Stompy, Mardu Energy, and the Golgari ban list. You'll see that there are two downward outliers, which are the Energy build and Frog Tempo, which people love playing, but there was the positive outlier of the Muxus deck as well. And this is in spite of it actually having the second largest sample size in terms of games played, third largest sample size in terms of total number of runs, which was very surprising, especially considering that this is known as a difficult deck to pilot.
Yeah, definitely. And I think part of that, it being a difficult deck to pilot, we both kind of talked about this off the podcast, but I think because it's difficult to pilot, the people that are confident enough to pick it up and play it in the metagame challenge end up being pretty strong players that are familiar with the format, and so that might have also contributed to the positive win rate.
Yeah, exactly. This is by far and away the strongest fast combo deck and most popular one. We'll get to deck diversity in a little bit, but diversity among combo decks was a little condensed this time. So a lot of people were playing the same combo deck, and pretty much all the good combo players saw this deck, saw it do well early in the challenge, and said, I want to try it. I wasn't planning on playing it this much this weekend. In fact, a couple days ago, I was planning on playing like Black White Belcher. So on like Wednesday, Thursday last week, I went to play some ladder with Belcher, and it didn't feel too great. And I said, oh, okay, I guess I won't be able to squeeze out at 7-0 with a rogue combo list with Dark Ritual. But then I just saw Muxus streaming in Discord, and he was having a lot of success with his deck, and I'm like, all right, I guess I give it a shot. And I got a 7-0 on my first run with it. I think I also got a 5 and a 6 win run with it. Yeah,
Um,
there were a lot
no,
of
so
people
yeah,
in GC kind of just chilling, playing. We were all hanging out, all helping each other too, which is like really cool. Muxus was like backseating a bit in my run. Uh, I was backseating other people's runs because it is a pretty difficult deck to wrap your head around. Some of the lines aren't straightforward. When you're putting together a storm line for this deck, you like kind of just barely can count to 10, and you have to do some like real edge case things. Like once I put Saint Elenda into play, and I purposely picked Faith's Fetters just so that I would have one extra besiege target next turn for when I stormed on the following turn, because I knew I would probably be one besiege target short if I did not do that. It's a really fun deck to try and figure out.
yeah, and it's kind of fun in that your lines don't feel as autopilot-y as Necro Storm, where you're just like beseech, 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 right? You kind of have to map out your turns a bit more because you're not as good at storming out as a deck like Necro Storm.
Yeah, you're not good at storming out, and there's a lot of limitations that come with the deck, because you have Sorin Elenda shoved into the deck, which does give you easy wins sometimes, but it is 8 dead cards that don't contribute to Storm traditionally. There are a lot of ways it can contribute to Storm, such as sacrificing Elenda for 7 mana, but it generally doesn't, and especially when you have the card Necro Dominance in play instead of Necropotence, it's really, like, really tough to figure out what 5 cards you need to keep in your hand in order to actually win the game. And Muxus himself put it best. He said the real way to learn Necro in this deck is just to get some reps in.
But yeah, no, so I think that's the most surprising performance we've had this weekend by like quite a bit, and there was a really good amount of deck diversity too, just in general, which I don't think we've seen in a metagame challenge to this extent.
Yeah, we'll go over the graphs that I made showing deck diversity in a little bit, but you can see in the 7-win column, we had a lot of decks put up multiple 7 wins. A lot more than usual. Obviously, the ones that everybody was expecting, like Show and Tell, the energy variants, the popular mid-range variants are there. But then Mono Black is a variant of Green Black, showed up multiple times. Natural Order Midrange showed up multiple times. Jund Luris showed up multiple times. A Grul deck with Minskin Boo in it showed up multiple times, and there were even a bunch of cute one-offs by things like Burn and Madness. So creature deck variety is at an all-time high, and I was like pleasantly surprised to see the number of creature decks that people got there with.
Yeah, definitely. It was very interesting to not see a weekend full of energy.
Yeah, and I think that's actually like a really good segue into the charts that I could show next. So I made some charts based on the previous slide here, and if you're listening to the podcast, you might not be able to see them, but we can go ahead and describe them. Since you just mentioned energy, I'm going to scroll down to this chart down here, which is probably the most telling of all of them. This is a chart that shows every single creature deck. I went through the data, I picked out which ones were creature decks. The chart on the right is from last event. And if you're just listening in, there is one slice of that chart that is literally 2/3 of it. 2/3 of all creature decks last time were Mardu energy specifically, and more than 75% were all of the energy variants put together. The format really was coalesced around energy, and if you look on the left-hand side, you see significantly more variety. 20% Boros energy, 13% Red Stompy, 11% Psychic Frog decks, 10% Mardu energy, 9% ban list, and we see a plethora of random decks at 1 and 2%, like literally about 24 of them, which is so much more than we had last time.
Yeah, it's a crazy amount of deck diversity, and especially just seeing that we're no longer being gate kept by energy, or at least that seems to be the case, which is just really different than what the format has seen in the past about year and a half, or since basically since MH3, right?
Yeah, and it's the anthologies. It's 100% the anthologies and those cards, which is what is enabling these other creature decks to compete with energy. If we didn't get the anthology, you could argue that maybe like the Golgari ban list deck could be kind of close. It would be missing some cards like Barrelgoyf Opposition Agent, but those are kind of like the flex slot cards. It would still have Strip Mine Ancient Tomb. Well, H2 was still recent. I'm discounting that, but that was still within the last month or two. But the anthology is really giving us mid-range cards that can really punch above the weight of Lurrus decks is what really increased diversity. And you'll see that the biggest energy deck was a Boros energy list that was leveraging those new creatures instead of leveraging Lurrus.
Yeah, and I think you can say that the changes from Edge of Eternities, particularly Ancient Tomb and Strip Mine, were also like very good pulls away from traditional Mardu energy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Strip Mine is very taxing on the Mardu mana base. If you're getting stripped as Mardu, it's very easy to get pulled off of your colors. If you want to play Strip Mine as Mardu, it's incredibly difficult because you have those high color requirements. You often need all three of your colors on one. You're going to need double white on two, very frequently. You need black white on two sometimes for a peddler. It's tough to make it work. And what ends up happening is that the Mardu players have to play Strip Mine in a spell slot, meaning they're playing like 25 lands in their aggro deck, which is weird. Or they have to play like Deathrite Shaman to defensively hedge against Strip Mine, which is also a lot of deck building strain on the deck.
Yeah, and then also like this, yeah, and then also just like with Ancient Tomb being present, like that was kind of the way that Boros Energy would go over the top of Mardu, and kind of shift until in a way too, is they would both have uh access to the One Ring, and now with Ancient Tomb, just a lot of decks have easier time accessing the One Ring at a faster pace and can kind of go over the top of energy a turn earlier, which is really big.
Exactly, and it's all the other anthology threats that pair with Ancient Tomb really well as well. You can easily curve into Broadside Bombardiers, Barrowgoyf, Pyrogoyf, any of those 3 and 4 drop stompy threats that we got recently added to the meta.
Okay, so with all this talk about how diverse the creature decks in the format were this past weekend, do we want to talk about how diverse the combo decks were?
I knew you were going to segue into that because this is something that makes
Uh,
the two of us sad as, Necro deck enjoyers. And this might be like really surprising because I wasn't expecting it to fall off a cliff this much, but I'll read it out to the people who are listening. Last metagame challenge, Omnitel was the most popular combo deck by far, and it always is. It was 38%, a bit over a third. But after that, we had a nice, healthy split of other combo decks. Belcher at 14%, excuse me, Jetstorm at 11%, Blue Belcher at 9%, Jund Breach at 7%, Tainted Pact at 6%, and a couple of other small combo decks that people did 1 or 2 runs with. This time, unfortunately, it's incredibly polarized. 66% show and tell variants. And that's actually counting Sneak and Show as a different deck. If we were to lump in Sneak and Show, it would be 70%. and 25.6% of the Muxus deck, as we've grown to call it, leaving less than 5% for other different combo decks. It's pretty much a two combo deck format, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting moving forward in that I think it is going to push decks, and we've already kind of seen this quite a bit in deck building, but it's going to push decks for their sideboards, especially to have even more targeted sideboard effects towards show and tell and Necro if they have some kind of catch-all. If not, they might just be targeting show and tell.
Yeah, show and tell. I mean, we were the people who were telling everyone to place 10 sideboard cards for show and tell. I guess it was mostly me last podcast where I told you you need 10 cards in your energy deck to beat it. And even with that huge target on its back, show and tell still seems like it's succeeding, which is incredible. But that is really interesting that it leaves room for other combo decks to thrive because they're going to be dodging a lot of the hate, right? If people are really packing the show and tell hate, it might be possible to play Jund Breach or Blue Belcher or some other kind of niche combo deck.
Yeah, and the Muxus deck might be that, and it might
I
just
mean,
be a
yeah,
two combo deck
it
format. We
definitely
don't know
was.
fully yet, but at least this weekend it was definitely the Muxus deck that kind of filled that role of alternative combo deck that can get around some of the hate. I know in particular, I think I had one match where my opponent had because people aren't playing Deafening Silence anymore because it's just not good enough in the show and tell. But it is better against the Muxus deck, right? So people are running. Like I had an energy opponent running Vexing Bauble, and it was so much worse than Deafening Silence while I was playing Muxus deck because and I think that's part of it is they get to dodge that. Just because the sideboards are so targeted at show and tell, they're dodging these more specific anti-combo cards that might be good against them.
Exactly. And it's pretty tough to sideboard for the Muxus deck, even because if you do have something like a Vexing Bauble that is really killer to a lot of draws involving Chrome Mox or Grief Sacrifice, they do have the quote unquote easy bake part of the deck where they can just slam Sorin Elenda and say, okay, deal with it. You brought in 10 sideboard cards, but they can't deal with the Resolved Elenda, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's still really weird too because I think just rough guesstimate it was like I think about like 45% of the meta of the runs were combo, and when you have I think it's something like that, and then when you have the Turbo Muxus deck only being about was it like a quarter of that?
Yeah, I have it up right now.
It's
It's a
only yeah
46% combo, 13% of it being Dark Ritual combo, 33% of it being blue combo.
yeah. So the Muxus deck didn't even feel like it might not even just have it might not have enough meta share. It's like 10-11% of meta share. It's like how many sideboard cards do you really even want for that matchup, right? And it's kind of so
Exactly.
polarizing that you kind of need like four-ish sideboard card, like 4+ sideboard cards if you want to get a good matchup into it. If you're bad into it,
Yeah,
so it's very committing to just get a good matchup against a deck that is not taking up a ton of meta share like Show and Tell is.
exactly. And this is like 10% of the meta while it had everything going for it. So keep in mind, our sampling bias is the Discord server. In the Discord server, we have Muxus. We have a bunch of other really talented combo players who like played the deck really well this week. And we had a player named Kobe who took it through so many runs. We had me and you who took it through runs. So the population in the Discord server is more likely to play this deck than the average person in the challenge. Realistically, for the overall challenge, it was probably 5% or less of everybody in aggregate. And as we know, Necro decks like that are even less popular on ladder. On a given day on ladder, even if the Muxus deck is great and people keep playing it, it's going to be 3% of games. You really going to have 5 sideboard cards for 3%?
Yeah, and then even and especially in challenges like these, where you people are trying to grind and get as many games in as possible, there is going to be this bias towards playing these faster combo decks to like maximize the amount of runs that you can get in a weekend. And there's going to be a bias against these more control or tempo style decks that end up having match lengths of 15 to 30 minutes, right?
Yeah, what's interesting is like the Muxus deck is counterintuitively a bit slow for a Necro deck. It does have very fast starts with Sorin Alenda sometimes, and sometimes we get a 2-minute game. But Storm games with the Muxus deck actually take a while. I was looking at my untapped stats, and a game where you have to go through a Storm line does take 10 plus minutes because you have to deliberate a lot, and usually your Storm is split up across multiple turns. You have to play around your opponent's interactions. So a whole run with the Muxus deck is like an hour and a half to 2 hours, which is actually like pretty slow compared to something like Energy, and I would say it's probably even slower than Show and Tell.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Yeah, definitely. I agree with that.
Yeah, we saw a lot of mid-range too this time, especially compared to last time. Last metagame was 3% mid-range, or at least what I classified as mid-range. We can have an argument in the comments about whether or not energy counts as mid-range. But we're up to 22.7% mid-range decks, no energy decks being counted there. And the mid-range meta share was actually like really wide. We're seeing all sorts of things there. We're seeing Stompy decks, we're seeing Eldrazi decks, we're seeing Grul aggro decks, we're seeing mono red decks, we're seeing the ban list deck. It's actually really cool to see how much variety came through.
Yeah, and they're all trying to beat up on each other too. It's really weird too, is that with show and tell doing so well, it's like, okay, well, do I take one rings out of the main deck at this point because you want to because just like improve your game ones against show and tell, but then you look at it and it's like, oh no, that's just all the combo just happens to be show and tell, and so it's like you kind of still just need to fight off all these mid range decks that you're matching up into, and so you kind of still need one ring in the main, because there was still, yeah, it's like 50-ish% or okay with aggro, yeah, it's still like around like probably like 50-ish%, right? Where it's like
Yeah,
aggro tempo stuff, and you still have to be interactive and play your One Ring out against these aggro and other mid range decks.
yeah, exactly. Combo combined is about 45%, and aggro midrange combined is about 45%, with the last sliver being what you could call controller tempo, depending on what kind of a mood you're in. In this particular meta recap, some people might have noticed if you're watching the screen, I categorize zero decks as control. I put all the blue psychic frog decks as tempo. Control decks nowadays in Timeless, like you're running Tameo, Hydroponics Engineer, you're running some amount of tempo E creatures, even if you're a very controlling build. And I decided to not like try to draw a line as for what counted as hard control and what didn't. So I did lump them all together. One Ring notably is actually pretty bad into those decks that are playing counter spells. So One Ring is only good about 40 something percent of the meta. So I can definitely see like arguments that it's less mandatory and that you could move it to the sideboard or maybe even cut it.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, and I think Marley ended up doing that in his Gruul list, where he only played two, and I think he ended up moving down to zero for later on. But yeah,
Yeah, we can
we
go
can talk
into
about.
specific decks if we want now because there are a lot of cool ones. Up here is Marley's Gruul list. I have a screenshot that he sent me of it. Of course, it's a picture of his screen. I thought it had enough character to leave in the podcast. But this is a really cool angle on Gruul. Obviously, we're abusing Strip Mine here with 4 Renin, 6 Forberry Zone Guard, 4 Strip Mine, and 4 Crop Rotation. He's very in on that angle, but I also like that he is playing the Stompy angle very, very well. Rather than playing the One Ring as his 4 drops, he's playing all 4 copies of Minskin Boo, which is crazy high energy, and I love it.
Yeah, it's definitely really fun, and it is kind of if you look at it's very much a mana bully deck. I think it's probably the most like on top of playing Strip Mine, you're also like the Ragavan, the Mana Dorks, along with your Chromox, Ancient Tomb stuff. But like Fable is also kind of a mana bully card. Like if you just get it on the play and then you follow it up with a Strip Mine, it's really annoying. It's very Yeah, it's probably the closest like a Ponzer like mana abuse deck that I think we've seen in the format.
Yeah,
But
the
really
amount
cool to
of
see it get a couple trophies.
amount of mana abuse in the deck is actually kind of crazy. With Chrome Mox, generally you aren't playing Chrome Mox in your fair creature decks. You're only doing it if you're going very, very stompy, like Mono Red Prison is. So it's cool to see like even a 2-color green deck that could leverage more cards like Ignoble Hierarch. Like this deck could be playing Deathrite Shaman, and it isn't.
It could
He's
be, yeah.
actively choosing, I don't want to spend a turn untapping with my Deathrite Shaman. I want the mana now.
Yeah, I know some people I think that took the list also were trying Deathrite Shaman. It might end up on Deathrite Shaman. It might not. But I think it's one of those things where okay, you might have the full 75 just correct and you just nailed it. But you might have 60 cards correct and and you like mostly nailed it and you nailed it enough that okay, this archetype is strong. There's some power here. This is kind of worth like getting some more people in on and trying and seeing what they kind of come up with and any additions that they might like, right?
Exactly, that's the philosophy. To 7-0 at the metagame challenge, you don't necessarily need to have the perfect 75, but you do need to have something that lines up very well against what you end up playing against. So if he queued into a bunch of decks that are weak to Strip Mine, or don't have enough removal, or he just queued into Show and Tell while he has 4 Vexing Bauble, 4 Whirling Vortex in his sideboard, you're going to get the 7-0 and you're going to string it together.
Yeah, and there's some variance and stuff there, but I mean, two different people 7-0'd with it. Yeah, it's you're on the board when you get a couple trophies in the metagame challenge. So this will definitely be something that I'm going to try later on in the week for sure.
Yeah, me too. I look forward to seeing how people are gonna iterate with this. Whether or not the One Ring is involved in this, like you mentioned before, is also another very interesting piece of the puzzle, and it's something that's going to
Mhm.
change as the meta changes. I think ladder always has more fair decks than a challenge does, so I think the One Ring is pretty correct on ladder. You always see less combo, especially less Dark Ritual combo. It's really just for the weekend that all the sweaty Dark Ritual and Show and Tell nerds come out of the woodwork to try and bully you.
If you had to guess one card that I want to try in this list at some point after I get some games on the original 75, what would you guess? There's a 3 drop that I might want to add and try in this list.
Bombardiers, our favorite.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. That's yeah. So we'll see because you already
Yeah.
have the Chromox, you already have the Chromoxes and the Mana Dorks to go with it, and it's like it's good with Fable and stuff too, and it's
Mm-hmm.
already on Tomb. Yeah, but it looks like a fun list, so I definitely want to try it.
Yeah, it'll be super fun. They need to errata it so I can throw planeswalkers too. I want to throw a run at my opponent. Yeah, there's a couple of other really cool decks from the weekend. We saw some Boomer Rock 7-Os. This is a cool one that's playing both Grist and Agatha's Soul Cauldron. These cards interact with each other very favorably. I'll zoom in a little bit if you do want to read the cards really quick. Grist counts as a creature in all zones other than the battlefield, including your graveyard. Agatha's Soul Cauldron lets your creatures share abilities with each other. So if you put a Grist under your cauldron, all of your creatures will become planeswalkers. They can all uptick to make insects. You could then start sharing the abilities even more with the insects. And it's a really cool interaction that modern players have been using for a while, but I hadn't seen yet in Timeless, which is really cool. With all those insects running around, natural order becomes a thing. So if we end up in a meta where a lot of people are playing fair and a lot of decks are teching against each other, the old tech of natural order just comes out of nowhere and says, I'm going to start slamming Atraxas and Crater Hoofs. Can you deal with this now?
Yeah, and they're playing 10 Mana Dorks now too with Force Strip Mine. So
Yeah.
this is another list that is very much capable of being a mana bully.
Yeah, definitely. And for Chromox on top of that too. Like the amount of acceleration that this deck can put out even without Dark Ritual is pretty crazy. And like I just love the meta call of Natural Order. It is a card that has been stone cold unplayable since Modern Horizons came out, pretty much. Energy entered the meta, and people said, why would you ever play Natural Order? Energy can just remove the creature. It doesn't matter if you put an Atrax into play and you draw 7 cards off of it, it's just going to get hit by a Swords to Plowshares. You are going to die on the next combat step. But I think we're getting to a really interesting place where we can start entertaining Natural Order as a finisher again if you build your deck to bully your opponents like this one.
Yeah, and it kind of does both and going over the top of mid range and then also giving you access to some of these faster kills that you need against show and tell, right? So that's like interesting. I think also just the inclusion of 2 endurance in the main seems crazy to me. I have not run main deck endurance at all since MH3 dropped, and we got endurance. And again, I mean, got a 7-0 with it. So is it 1 or 2 7-0s? Is it
It was 2 7-Os. There were two different
7-0?
Natural Order piles, Natural Order mid range piles. They were pretty similar to each other. I don't know if the other one had the main deck endurances. It is really interesting. I don't. Yeah, I also am kind of not a believer in the main deck endurance, but like if you're playing the Strip Mine Worry Zone Guard game against your opponent and main deck endurance is in your deck, you can absolutely draw it, you can evoke it, you can mess up their Strip Mine plan, and then you Strip Mine them, and you're significantly ahead now.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I could see that happening. Or if you just can avoid getting strip mined, or yeah, you take out their strip mine for the rest of their game, basically, because it's shuffled back, to where they have to redraw another copy, um, or you just don't get strip mined in the first place, and you can continue executing your plan, and you can natural order the next turn or something like that. I see scenarios where it makes sense. So I'll try it. I'm not gonna. I really hate the idea of just trying a deck and immediately taking out cards that I don't like because they're there for a reason. So this is another really interesting list that seems really fun. They definitely screams Yawgmoth player to me, just based on the build.
Yeah, based on
But it looks cool.
the Grist Cauldron as well.
Grist
It's
and
cool
Cauldron.
tech. I've never
Yeah,
played with it on Arena. Like I know it's the classic modern tech, but I've never actually put a Grist under a Soul Cauldron.
yeah, but it looks fun. I mean, yeah, I want to try like a Rumble too if you're already on Cauldron and stuff. But yeah,
Oh
it
yeah.
looks really fun. It looks really fun. Definitely gonna
Yeah.
have a good time once rank resets on ladder.
Yep, exactly. Rumble would be super, super fun in this deck. There's a lot of ways to take it. It's really funny is that this deck, it has a boomer energy, as you would call it, because it's, the boomer rock. Rock is the classic boomer archetype. People love it with their Liliana, the Veils, and the Dark Confidants. And I called this a boomer deck in front of someone, and they pointed out to me that there are no boomer cards in this deck. It has the cards that have the same
It's,
energy like Grist, but it actually has none of the classic like modern boomer rock
yeah, there's no
cards.
point.
The only
Yeah.
boomer cards here are like Natural Order and Deathrite Shaman, which are not modern legal.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't even think I've played a list with Soul Cauldron and Bowmasters, just with the army token just naturally being turned on Soul Cauldron. Like I haven't gotten to do that yet, because it hasn't been in Timeless at all, right? So yeah,
Yeah,
this list
it's
looks really
so cool. Yeah, this
yeah.
is gonna be really interesting. Like, I just want to play with Grist Cauldron a little bit because, like, if we're getting to a point where because what I think is happening is these mid-range decks are trying to find ways to either out-dirtle each other or go over the top. Natural Order was a great answer to that question, but Soul Cauldron shenanigans and having like a cute little kind of combo baked into your deck is also another way to generate a lot of value to go over the top of your opponent. So I'm looking forward to trying it in the near future.
Yeah, and even like the lack of sword or just with swords meta game the meta share of swords to plowshares going down a lot. I mean, if you get a turn to Atraxa down against some of these decks like green black, mono red Stompy, they don't really outrace it a lot of the time either, and they don't really have a way to interact with it, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
I
They
mean,
don't race, they don't interact. Show and Tell stopped interacting too because, for those who don't know, Bant Show and Tell 2 months ago was the winning build. People loved playing Bant Show and Tell. It played Swords of Plowshares, it played Fragment Reality, it played Orium's Chant. It was leaning on that white interaction. But now that we've gotten the new set and we're all playing Ancient Tomb and we have the latest group of cards, we're back on Soul Tie for Show and Tell, or at least most people are, and they're leaning into Abrupt Decay for their removal. So something like an Atraxa or a Crater Hoof is legitimately unanswerable by Show and Tell. You're forcing them
yeah,
to
and
win in a short amount of
it'll
time.
close out. Hmm. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, another really cool list that did well this weekend.
All right. Stoneboy got a 7-0 as well. Like, people always say it's impossible to build control, and then the control mage shows up with their four. Oh, this only has two main deck subtleties. I take that back. They show up with some amount of main deck subtlety and some amount of Flare of Denial, exactly 3 and 2. And Stoneforge Mystic. We got some really cool cards for Stoneforge Mystic in the anthology as well.
Yeah, this I stayed far away from Stoneforge Mystic because I don't have any experience with it, and so I don't even know if it would be good in Timeless, and so I kind of go, okay, if someone figures out a build that y'all go do that for however long it takes and figure something out. And it seems like Haratsa got a 7-0, I think, on his first try with the list.
Yeah, he
Um,
had one run all weekend and it was a 7-0.
yeah,
Powered him. That was not like the case of somebody only reporting their 7-0. He told me he only had time for one run and he made it
yeah,
count.
just the one. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
Stoneforge Mystic is like a really cool utility piece for this deck, and it kind of functions as the win condition. Of course, this deck has always had like Tamiyo Hydroponics as the win condition, but those cards are very slow to actually win the game in combat. Oftentimes, you want to be able to opt for a fast combat win, and Stoneforge Mystic is essentially a modal spell that lets you, oh boy, let's use Alchemy, where it's conjure one of three cards into your hand. You draft from the spellbook, Greaseball.
mhm.
Would you like to draft a card that kills your opponent quickly? Would you like to draft a big life linker to solve? Or would you like to draft card advantage?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you ran into much sideboard hate this weekend. I'll say that.
Yeah, I do
But
really like these new Stoneforge Mystic targets for the format. Like, we could debate whether or not it's good enough for the format, but I appreciate that it is something that people have in the deck builder's toolkit, even if the format's power level is past it. Like, we're definitely at the point where Cauldron won't destroy this format, but I really like that you can just slap this into a deck, and then you have this crazy creature that'll kill your opponent in 4 turns. We have access to the classic Batter Skull. We have cards like Cryptic Coat and Lion Sash that weren't in this deck. Actually, I think we do have Lion Sash in the sideboard for Graveyard Hate. Cryptic
yeah,
Coat is the
one line sash.
classic Stoneforge Mystic card advantage card. This time he's opting for Tome of Gadwick, which is an alchemy card. Lets you conjure a card from the spellbook. Oh boy, what's in the spellbook? It's a bunch of blue cantrips, so this essentially draws you a card every time your creature attacks.
Yeah, super interesting. I think. Yeah, I'm this really looks really neat too. I'm probably gonna try this last out of the 3 decks just because I tend to avoid blue decks, but this looks fun. This looks fun. I don't think. Yeah, it just looks really interesting. I haven't really touched the Stoneforge deck, and this might
Yeah,
be
me
the deck
too.
that gets me to craft for Stoneforge Mystic. But
Yeah, the two of us are not blue mages, and we absolutely need to have one of the blue mages on the show in the near future to talk a bit more about this kind of stuff. But I'm glad to see them like starting to build with 4 Ponder, 4 Brainstorm in their list. It gives a level of consistency and power that is mandatory to keep up with Timeless nowadays. So I'm super excited to see like what direction these sorts of lists go in the near future.
yeah, definitely, definitely. All
We're
right, we
gonna
want to kind of go through some of our personal experiences this weekend. We both got in good chunk of games.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start first with the Muxus deck because I know we both played it. So Muxus deck was super cool to see pop up over the weekend. Like I gave the anecdote before, I thought I would maybe play some Belcher, changed my mind, saw Muxus streaming, having lots of success. I got a 7-0. I think I got a 7-6. Actually, I have all my runs written down here. So I got a 7-0 first try with the Muxus deck, and then my other Muxus runs, I got a 6, I got a 1, and a 5 and a 1. Okay, so I got a 5, a 6, and a 7 win run with Muxus deck. It was super fun. The deck feels very, very powerful. Uh, by the end of it, when I was getting 1 win per run, I was getting quite like tired because it's a demanding deck to play, thinking through all the lines. And an experience that I had with this deck is that I tried it, a couple weeks ago when Muxus was first talking about it. And I said, you know what, this is pretty good, but I think I like my Belcher deck better. I came back to it with fresh eyes for the metagame challenge. And a lot of the storm lines that weren't obvious to me started jumping out at me. I was using Necro a lot better just because I was looking at the deck with fresh eyes and realizing that I had a lot of biases and assumptions going into it. So this is a very high skill deck. I did pretty well with it. Muxus and a couple of the other gamers helped backseat a little bit and point me in the right direction, which was awesome. But like, I felt myself leveling up in real time when I was playing this deck, and it was super super fun.
Okay, so yeah, and I'm gonna ask you some follow-up questions because I think both these things happened to me while I played the Muxus deck this weekend. One, did you mull to 3 and then win? Mull to 3 or less and then win? And two, did you ever discard a hand size off the arena timer and just get a random 5 cards?
So I can't remember specifically if I had a mull to 3 and win, but I think so. I think I had a pretty low mulligan to win. You absolutely can mulligan down to 3 cards with this deck and win. Sometimes even mull to 2. I remember I had a mull to 2 situation. I don't think it worked out because I didn't draw the mana, but like theoretically, if I drew a black mana source before I got discarded, I could have won on the mull to 2. So this deck does have absolutely crazy mulliganing powers, and we talked about it in a previous episode. We did the math. This deck has better turn 1 Necro map, like Necro odds, than Belcher or any other Necro deck, just because it runs a lot of untapped black sources. Like Muxus
Yeah.
really did max out on that when he built the deck. Kind of the intention is that you can mull all the way down to 3 cards and still have a successful game. And then
Yeah,
running
and
out
I
on the
think for
timer, I don't think I did, but it got
okay.
dicey quite a few times. I was up against it more than once.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I think what's interesting too is just with the amount of black sources you have, you can actually play through. I think I won 2 games through one commandeer or like through a commandeer in each game, which I had a lot more trouble doing with Belcher and Sorin Storm in particular because those decks just played less untapped black sources, and so what would happen is usually if you spent all your mana and you played it, you got commandeered on something, even if it was like a Sorin or something, you would eventually draw like a white source in Belcher or like a Phyrexian Tower in Sorin Storm. And you were just really bad at redrawing into like hard casting a Necro or something. And that was just one of the small things that I think this deck had a better time doing. Is it doesn't feel as it's still bad into Commandeer, right? It's a Dark Ritual deck, but it didn't feel as bad into Commandeer as the other 2 decks that had previously had a lot of meta share.
Yeah, I agree. The deck is built to have like a lot more live outs when it's top decking. Like usually you still do lose when you get commandeered because your opponent is half the time commandeering a necropotent or a demonic tutor, and that really sucks to give to them. But this deck also
Mhm.
has Beseech as another thing that you could top deck, and if you top deck a Beseech at any point and you naturally hit 4 mana, which is very likely, you can get any card in your deck and then just start playing Magic again.
Yeah, I think I had some really cool experiences with Opposition Agent too, post board against Show and Tell. I think so game 3 match 7 game 3 against Show and Tell. I had basically my opponent had a fetch up. They were on the play. They had a fetch up. They had blue fetch up. I have like an MDFC, two Chromoxes, a Sorin, a Beseech, and an Opposition Agent, right? So I have and a Dark Ritual, right? Dark Ritual, that's a big one. And so I have to I can leave up Opposition Agent for their fetch, but I have to bolt in my MDFC, right? So it's very, very, very telegraphed. So I do that. Pay 3, untapped black, pass my turn, which has to be the most suspicious telegraph thing I've done in like or just
Yeah.
by far, right? It just looks super, super fucking suspicious. And then they fetch. I play Dark Ritual because they are afraid of the opposite, or they know the opposition agent is coming because it's so telegraphed. They commandeer my Dark Ritual and then play their own opposition agent in response, which is just a wild line. It's like a 3-for-1 for Dark Rit, and then they get an early opposition agent.
Yeah,
Um,
that's crazy. Opposition Agent is an
yeah,
absolute beating against Show and Tell because the thing is they're going to take out all their removal against you. Like if they're the Sultai version that's only playing Abrupt Decay as removal, the Bant version's going to have an easier time because they leave swords in. But Show and Tell, Sultai Show and Tell is rather stone cold dead to Oppo Agent. I had my own funny Oppo Agent moment as well, but it was actually like my opponent's Opposition Agent. They played Swamp and a Chrome Mox for turn on their first turn on the play, which actually, they were on the draw. I had a fetch land in play. I was playing Show and Tell, my one run of Show and Tell, where I went 1-1. This is how I lost. I went fetch land pass with a Veil of Summer in my hand, being very safe against a black deck. My opponent goes Swamp, Chrome Mox, pitch a black card, and then Thought Seizes me. I know
okay, yeah.
arena gamers don't have the best sequencing and they're just going to play their Chrome Mox out before they thought seize, so I didn't think anything of it. So I went to fetch to Veil of Summer, and then my opponent instantly went Dark Ritual Opposition Agent and absolutely fooled me because I assumed that they were an arena gamer and messing up the sequencing. Because me too, I do the same thing. I'm not always paying attention and I just slam my cards sometimes. So Oppo Agent is a beating. It's fun. When I was playing the Muxus deck, I don't think I personally got a good game with it, but I think that's just variance.
And it's interesting too, is like if they don't have a turn 1 play, or if you don't have a turn 1 play and your fetch gets opposition agents, you probably don't have a turn 2 play anymore either.
Yeah, that's the really killer part.
Mhm. But no, it was just really neat because it basically opposite because off the back of opposition agent, it forced a commandeer out of my show and tell opponent, make him go down 3 cards for 1 dark ritual, which is pretty good trade. And I had a 7 that I kept, and I was actually able to play through them. And eventually won just off. I drew the second opposition agent and just had opposition agent beatdown. Just off the back of getting the value off of the dark ritual for commandeer trade, because they
That's
just spent so many cards getting there. So it was really cool. It was really cool.
yeah, that's awesome.
Mm.
You have any other decks that you had a lot of fun with this weekend?
Yeah, so I played mono red Stompy as well. So I had so my results were I had one Muxus run where he backseated me and I 7-0'd that, and then I had 4 runs on mono red Stompy. I think it was a 5-1, 4-1, a 1-1, and a 7-0. So Show and Tell is definitely mono red Stompy's worst matchup. Uh, I lost to Show and Tell twice. Mono red actually feels like pretty good into Mardu and some of the other mid-rangey threats, just because you have so much removal. And all in all, yeah, it felt pretty good. It like Show and Tell is a rough matchup, but that's a bit of an older list. But yeah, it was cool. It felt fine. It felt fine. Really cool to do well with it. Yeah, we're up to like 4 rolling vortex now and stuff. We can try and just like add it into the Mox field or something. But yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and it seemed to have game against pretty much everything outside of Show and Tell. I think Show and Tell's a bad matchup.
Yeah, I just pulled
Which
up what I had saved on Moxfield, which is from last week. A couple things have changed. Obviously, the sideboard was stacked for Show and Tell a lot more. We started seeing Bergie being played in the main deck, which is a very niche card. A storm card,
Yeah.
some people could say. People have seen this before in like Ruby Storm. Whenever you cast a spell, add red mana until end of turn. You don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. That's a classic storm card. But did you know that this card also says that creatures you control can boast twice during each of your turns? Such as broadside bombardiers. I didn't know that. I had to be shown the card. And then what's really neat about it is that it has a backside, and this kind of acts as extra copies of the One Ring. It's just a way to get card advantage because the mono red deck is full of like a lot of hot air, to put it no other way. It's a lot of red cards that are only situationally good that you pitch, a lot of MDFCs, a lot of Chrome Moxes, things that you don't necessarily want to be drawing in the late game.
Yeah, and it works through Bowmasters and Shieldred against Mono Black when they're discarding you off your One Rings and stuff like that. It's the back half has felt really reasonable. I haven't gotten to do the double boast thing yet. Um, I know even with the front side, if you have a One Ring in play and you're just trying to get rid of your hand, you can just kind of cast a bunch of spells off of the fact of Bergie netting you some mana. You know, you could go Bolt, play a Fury out, and then suddenly you're ramped by you're ramped by mana. So
Yeah,
it's felt reasonable. I think part of this like kind of theoriocraft of why Bergie is okay is that in mono red in particular, you have your elemental pitches, your Chromox pitches, and then you also have Fable of the Mirror Breaker. And so there's this kind of this idea that some of your red cards that are less played are gonna be, you can just kind of commit to pitching them most of the time, and then keep them for flexibility when they really matter. And I think Bergie's kind of in this space right now. At some point, I might try anti-combo cards and just say like, oh, I just have like one or two rolling vortex in the main, and I'm committed to pitching them against my non combo matchups. There's, I think there's some interesting stuff in the space. Golgari is also kind of in this realm where they're running like they're also running Grief and they're also running the Chromox, right? And so if they get another pitchable like an unmasked card or something like that, or it is kind of interesting the idea of having flex cards in your main deck that are situationally good, and then otherwise you can just pitch to bail out, right?
yeah, I like
But yeah,
totally 100% agree with that take, especially for the mono red deck. Because like you main deck 4 Fury in a show and tell format, as well as playing all of these bolts and removal spells. Of course, Bolt can go face, but Fury cannot. This is a card that really should be a sideboard card. It should be relegated to the sideboard. It should be unplayable in a metagame challenge dominated by show and tell, but everybody was playing 4 copies of it still, just because there are 12 different ways to get rid of this card in your deck.
yeah, yeah, and when it is good, it's amazing, right? It'll kill like 2 energy 1 drops, or it'll kill Guide Pride plus the token off the Guide Pride. It'll randomly deal 7 off of Bombardier.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, I really do like your idea of like trying main deck Rolling Vortex or maybe even main deck Fiery Magic. Like a lot of these really
Mhm.
backbreaking sideboard cards you can absolutely afford to play in your main deck in a deck like this.
Yeah, yeah, and there were some really cool lines. Like I think I got to Fire Magic against Mardu, and then pick up my Fire Magic with Pinnacle Monk.
Oh, that's cool.
And after, yeah, I got like a 3-for-1 off the Fire Magic, and then you pick it right back up, and they're just like, okay, what do I do now? It's a very very assertive play.
Yeah, and it's like you said, I really do like your points because these are things I haven't thought about before. It also does work in the black deck.
Hmm.
Unmask is a cool card. Here's a legacy card, not on Arena. It is pretty much just like Grief. You may remove a black card in your hand from the game instead of paying Unmask's mana cost. Look at target player's hand, choose a non-land card. They discard it, so it is. I mean, that's exactly Grief without the body, right? I think that's the exact text
Right.
on
Yeah.
it. Except this is target player. You
Right.
can unmask yourself, which is very useful in the legacy decks that like to run it.
Hmm. But yeah, I think that's just something to kind of keep an eye on is when you start increasing the amount of pitchable effects in your deck, you can kind of maybe start experimenting with some of these sideboard cards or like these silver bullet cards that are situationally very very good.
That's a good point.
Oh, and also I do think that this idea also just gets a lot better in open deck lists because you know when they're good. On the dark, if you mold a 6, right, you're probably not keeping a rolling deck vortex against companionless, but like in an open deck list in a tournament, you know when it's good. So I think that strategy gets a bit better in those scenarios as well.
Yeah, that's a really cool bit of skill expression, actually, knowing what your opponent's on and mulliganing. I really love all of these points that you've brought up about mono red lately. Right. There were a couple other decks that I
Thank
got a
you.
chance to play too over the weekend.
Mhm.
I did play a bit of energy too. I didn't get a 7-0, but I got a 5 and a 6 with two different energy builds. Actually, I got two 5s with Boros and then a 6 and a 5 with Mardu, as well as I think one or two lower win runs. Boros Energy felt pretty decent to me. Unfortunately, the win rate was a bit lower than some of the other tier decks, but I think it's playable. Something that I did want to mention, like a question people are going to have, is like, what's the highest win rate energy archetype? Like, what was the clear winner of the win rate of the weekend? Boros Energy did get pulled, its win rate pulled down a little bit because I think a lot of people were attracted to it just because it's the one I recommended. So if they haven't been playing the format as much, they're just going to pick this up and play it. It might lower the win rate a little bit. Whereas the older Mardu Energy list, the people who really knew energy well and decided to stick to their guns, had a 78 win rate, which was much higher. The classic Boros build, which is the one that does not run Ancient Tomb, it runs Flage, it runs the One Ring, it runs Amped Raptor instead in those slots. It doesn't run Bombardiers either. Had only a 68% win rate, so even lower than that, unfortunately. And the highest win rate energy variant with multiple runs is this one down here. A very small sample size though, so don't read into that. But that's
Very small
Ancient
sample
Tomb
size.
Mardu.
Yeah.
These two runs here, the 5 and the 6, are me. I only did two runs with it, and I almost got the 7-0. I kind of wish I did because this deck is like kind of disgusting. I don't think I have a Mox field of it handy because why would I make a Mox field of it? It's disgusting. But you could imagine the broadside energy list here. I cut like these two flex slot lands to play two godless shrines, and then I cut Voice of Victory to play Peddler. And then every person I showed the list to said, "Why are you playing Ancient Tomb in your Peddler
Yeah.
deck? What is wrong
Yep.
with you?"
Mhm.
And then I said, "I want to fling Peddler at my opponent with a Bombardier. What is wrong with you?"
Yeah.
And it felt pretty decent, especially into show and tell for the weekend. That's why I did it, because show and tell was such a high incidence. Half the people I was playing against were on combo decks. I wanted to discard.
Yeah, and it is weird. Like, yeah, and I think this is the first time that energy has kind of felt up in the air as much as like a debatable 75. Whereas I feel like for the past year, it's kind of been, especially with Mardu. Mardu's probably had about like 80 to 85 cards that it like could run, and then they just kind of rotate around depending on the format and stuff like that. But now it feels like you really have to narrow it down and pick out what matchups you want to target and stuff like that. And there's not a clear consensus on builds right now, which is really neat for energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we mentioned this last podcast, I think we spent half of the podcast talking about like where energy is going to go. And my answer was, I don't know. Here's like three front runners. And I have the same opinion this week. I don't know. And you really have to pick what you're good at, what you're going to lose against. I feel like there's no way to build energy like we used to, where you can feel invincible, where you're the best creature deck in the format, and then you also have a good combo matchup because you're playing discard. It feels like you are absolutely making a concession somewhere in the deck building now, whether it's choosing to be weak to strip mine or weak to combo or weak to other creature decks. Like the concession has to come somewhere, and the builds are so like radically different if you were to compare them. Like this Mardu list doesn't have too much in common with the broadside list beyond like the actual energy cards. The interaction is different, the lands are completely different, and it's really interesting to try and figure it out. And I'm nowhere close to figuring it out personally.
Yeah, and even just looking at if you were looking at some of the runs and stuff as they happened during the weekend, there's some people they would get new player on random Soul Sisters deck, for their first like couple matches. I saw some people that they went 4-1 and they queued into show and tell 5 times in a row. So there's a lot of just variance in these regular runs too, where well, okay, maybe if you know you're gonna run in a show and tell 5 times, yeah, Mardu Energy is probably a good play, right? um,
Yeah, when I put Ancient 2 Mardu together, I think I only got show and tell once each run. I was counting on the 5 show and tell heater, which you usually hope
yeah,
to
yeah.
dodge. All right, anything else really cool in the data that you wanted to talk about?
Not the data. I guess. Do you want to talk about how GTA did this weekend, or do we want to go into
First, you're
that a
gonna
little bit?
ask me about my favorite card. I had two copies of GTA in my Boros sideboard. Um, every time it did literally anything, I cheered. Yeah, it's not that great. It's I think if we go back to like the old meta, like if we pull up the chart again, if we get back here where we have
Hmm.
66.8% Mordu energy, I think GTA absolutely tears it up. But if
Yeah.
we're
Okay.
here where we have 21% energy, I think it's a lot less defensible. I would have loved the card like 6 months ago to break Mardu Mirrors. It would have been so cool and so fun.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. And I think any like kind of gameplay notes or anything like that you had this weekend, because there were a lot of games played. I was hanging out on VC a lot. Even when I wasn't playing, I was seeing how other people played, that kind of thing.
The honestly, the main note I have is I was super happy to see like the amount of people that contributed this weekend. Like a lot of new faces, a lot of interesting decks. People who I'd like never really spoken to before were showing up and contributing their results, including people who contributed 7-0s, and also people who were honest and said, I copied the energy list, didn't do good. Here's 7 runs with it, and the most wins I got was 4. And I really appreciate when somebody comes through like that because it's hard to be honest when a lot of people are performing very well. So I appreciate all of the performance. Up here on this slide, I actually compiled everybody who got a 7-0 this weekend. Might have missed one or two because I did put the slide together manually. Kobe set our Discord record for getting 5 wins in one weekend, all with the same deck, which is really, really impressive. And Ali Ford tied the record. The old record for most wins in a weekend was 4 decks that Novos set a couple of challenges ago. And Novos did the same thing Ali did, where he went around the world and did it with 4 different decks. So it's really cool. One player did it with 4 different decks. One guy just one trick Dark Ritual literally all weekend and had the time of his life.
Yeah, and I think he accounted for Kobe counted for over, I think, a third of the runs total for the Muxus deck, and then I think he had not been posting in the Discord like that much, or if at all. Um,
Like, no, I'd never seen him
rolled up,
speak before this, I'm pretty sure. Like, the
yeah,
first message I had ever seen from him is him posting in the wrong
the
chat
first
that
seven
he
zero.
got a 7-0. He posted, like,
Yeah,
in the deck thread, and I'm like, hey, when you get a chance, can you post your results here? And then what he posts is like, oh, I have 2 7-0s already, and here's the list of all my other runs. And I'm like, okay, welcome to the Discord, pal. Happy to have you.
yeah, and I think he held like an 80% win rate or something like that over, or 80+% win rate over. I think like
Yes.
over 20 runs.
Yeah, it was
Um,
it was kind of crazy. He had very close to 80%. I can't remember if it was just over or just under.
I think it was just over. I think it was just over for the untapped.
Nice. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome to see.
Yeah, so that was really cool to see. I think probably I think the funniest like fringe punt that I saw multiple times this weekend was show and tell players playing Ponder with a Ragavan in play. They would leave a good card on top for Ragavan to hit, and then get hit by the Ragavan, exile show and tell, and then they like emote or whatever, or realize what they've
Oh
done
man, show and tell
with the
gamers. I
face up.
went against a show and tell gamer who didn't know how the instant speed loop worked. Like they put a show and tell into play against me, and then they like cast waterlog teachings, and they grabbed like they had the ability to do their instant speed loop. They grabbed a dig through time instead of trying to win, which is something that you do sometimes if you want to play around like surgical extraction, you could do that. But then they like dug through their deck and they kept digging through their deck with dig through time, and then eventually they drew a Sublime Epiphany, and then they just used it to bounce something, and then like scooped the game when they realized they couldn't get there. And I was like,
Oh man.
pal.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that's pick up and play, I guess.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not
I think
straightforward
something.
though. The
Yeah.
show and tell list is like that loop is not obvious. Like I've had to explain it to multiple people in Discord. Like it's not obvious that like Cyber Siphon or plus Sublime Epiphany is an infinite loop and that is indeed your main win condition.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think so. One other thing I've kind of noted, another like kind of fringe punt or subtle punt that people were missing a lot was there were actually like a lot of there are quite amount of there's a good amount of creatures that you want to play pre-combat in this format now. And so there's a lot of just random. So uh, if you strip like so, say your opponent has like one mana source open, right?
Hmm.
And you strip mine it, if they don't float or removal mana in response, it actually opens up a lot of your creature plays. Um, so like okay, just say it's like say it's like you're against black green, right? And you strip mine their overgrown tomb that's untapped, right? If they don't float a black in response, you can punish them. You can play Wary Zone Guard, you can play Bombardier, you can dash a Ragavan, you can play Gut.
Yep.
Um, there's a lot of ways to punish them if they don't represent a removal spell uh, in response to Strip Mine killing their land. And it's just a free thing to do, and people weren't doing it. And it was, I mean, if you know your bomb is going to get through because they didn't tap a mana, that's a very, very big deal. So that was
Yeah.
just another small punt that I noticed that people are missing against Strip Mine decks with so many creatures that matter pre-combat now.
Yeah, and it's a good observation because it's something that goes against like the traditional high level magic. Like when you learn to play magic at a decently good level, you get taught play your stuff post combat to make more ambiguity in combat for your opponent, right? That's what
Hmm.
people learn as they learn to play competitively, and that's true in like almost every constructed format, but Timeless is starting to turn it on its head a little bit, which is something I'm adjusting to personally, and like adjusting to things like that is harder than people give it credit. Like right now, we talk about how energy lists are kind of in flux, and I keep feeling like Mardu energy is worse than it is because I'm so used to the old build, how the old build plays, how I can kind of just like fearlessly shock and fetch and not care about strip mine, how like creature play patterns work with that deck. The kind of how the deck needs to sequence completely changed when we got strip mine, even if the deck itself isn't playing strip mine, and that is a difficult and interesting adjustment. And it's not just Mardu Energy. It's like every deck in the format and every person's behavior needs to adjust a little bit to all of these powerful new cards that we have. And these are cards like Strip Mine that are traditionally not available in constructed formats. So none of us have any clue how to play with them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I was watching Marley's, or sorry, not Marley, sorry, Ollie's 7-0 run for Mardu Energy, where they were playing where I think their opponent was a tempo, and their for their last match to win the trophy, they had a blue black opponent on strip mines, and it came up where they fetched and they fetched Sacred Foundry into Blood Crypt, or sorry, Sacred Foundry into like Godless Shrine into Blood Crypt, where having the three different lands to give you resiliency against strip mine really mattered.
Yeah.
And like even like or like they had two Sacred Foundries another game and a Godless Shrine, right? And you have to lead on your Sacred Foundries because you don't want to expose the Godless Shrine until it matters because that's your only black source for who knows how long, right? So there are a lot of just yeah more minor sequencing things coming in with things like Strip Mine that are new to the format.
Yeah, and they're deck building things too, right? Because if you look at energy, traditionally you wouldn't necessarily want the Blood Crypt. I remember this because Blood Crypt was always like a
It was a
sticking
big
point
fetch
that
one.
people would talk to me about because I always had one Blood Crypt in my list and it wasn't necessary in the past. And I don't know if it was optimal in hindsight. I thought it was really nice to have access to Blood Crypt so that I can more easily lead with Ragavan or Thoughtseize. But a lot of people didn't like the Blood Crypt. They said I need to be on all white lands, which is understandable. But now with Strip Mine, I think it's optimal. You need to have that extra land. When you're playing Boros Energy, you need to be shocking and fetching every single turn. You cannot fetch your basic planes unless you're against a Blood Moon deck. If you fetch your basic planes, you are going to get stripped off of red. You are going to be upset about it. And that's something I had to learn.
Yeah, so yeah, there's yeah, just all these everything is kind of with Strip Mine now kind of fucking up land interaction too in a bit. To be blunt, like you really have to sequence everything now and kind of understand what's going on in the format. Because if not, if you fetch incorrectly, yeah, Strip Mine could just really set you back a turn or multiple turns depending on how you top deck.
Yeah, and the format it's so fast and punishing nowadays because we have one drops like crop rotation that can make a strip mine appear out of nowhere. We have 2 and 3 mana cards that can loop strip mine to abuse it. We have 1 mana creatures that are snowbally in their nature that will amplify mistakes made on the first turn of the game. The format is at its most difficult that it's ever been, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's even like I think even against Show and Tell, there were some instances where you only like Chromox is your only red source, and you have an extra red source in hand. And against Show and Tell, you just have to throw your Chromox the turn that Bombardiers comes down to get your clock going and like set up your Pyrogoyf burn. There's just a lot of little minor things that can really add up. So I think there's a lot more skill expression, and it's kind of cool to see.
Yeah, it's really sick to see all the new play patterns emerge. And now we're going to enter like the phase of the meta where we have an idea of what the best decks are, but we don't have solid 75s on them. We just know kind of what cores work really well. Show and Tell core is amazing. The Strip Mine core is really strong. The Energy core is still pretty competitive. The Red Stompy core is competitive. Now we need to actually start hammering out 75s. We need to test against each other. Decks are going to budge a little bit in one direction. There's going to be a counter budge by the other decks, and then everybody's going to kind of start jockeying for meta share. So it's going to be like an exciting month or two coming up for Timeless.
Yeah, and I will say it's interesting is I think Show and Tell was the most targeted deck going in, and it still did really well. So I think that's also something we kind of have to. It does seem like the deck to beat right now out of all the lists that came up this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
I
think
didn't
yeah,
want to turn this into another show and tell good
no,
podcast,
yeah,
but
right.
this is the best show and tell has been in a while. No, it's okay. Show and tell, like the history of it for people who haven't been playing Timeless that long. When it first dropped, it was like one of the first truly broken cards to hit the format. So back in like Thunder Junction era, Show and Tell with Mana Drain was the best deck by a mile, and everybody was either playing Show and Tell, well, competitively, everyone was playing Show and Tell, they were playing Blueback Control, which is the deck that could beat it, or they were playing like a deck that would randomly prey on one of them, but wasn't that good. Then Modern Horizons came, Show and Tell got kind of put in its place. It still stayed a tier 1 deck, but it was like even with energy and whatever other good combo decks were. And now it feels like Show and Tell has very clearly, very cleanly pulled ahead again. I don't know if it's necessarily tier 0. Of course, everybody defines those tiers separately. I think if you ask me like what my tier decks in the format were, right now I think Show and Tell is the only clear tier 1 deck, and that everything else that is really good is kind of like tier 1.5 or tier 2. Like everything just feels half a step behind Show and Tell right now, and people are going to need to work on these other decks if they're going to stay competitive.
I think yeah. So I agree with that, and then I think I'm also on top of that. I think I'm also curious to see how, if people start running hate for the Muxus deck, not that it makes sense to or doesn't make sense to, and yeah, just kind of seeing how some of these like lower sample size decks that trophied and did well, that like how they end up settling into the meta, and if they're real decks or they had good runs or if they just had some powerful ideas that make sense in other decks. Like I think that's also really interesting too.
Yeah, and the things always change to a tournament environment and a non-tournament environment. Metagame challenge is a bit more like a tournament environment. I think at tournament environments, people are absolutely going to bring their Muxus hate. They're going to bring their unfair deck hate, and then for ladder, a bit less of it. And that's the fun part for me and you in about a month when the next tournament is coming up. We'll get to do a lot of testing, a lot of sideboard building, and hopefully have some cool podcast episodes where we talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's just more tempo and control in tournaments. That just seems to have been the case for a long time because they're not as constrained by time. But yeah, otherwise I agree. Yeah, and it's really interesting. Yeah, I don't feel confident about most of the matchups in the meta. Well, like yeah, a lot of the matchups just seem really undefined and not really well tested right now. So that it's a really interesting place to be.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's definitely exciting if you're like the kind of deck builder like me and Greaseball, where you have fun refining an existing list in like a really spiky way and trying to make it the best that it could possibly be. I mean, I had fun doing that with energy for like a year, and some people still haven't forgiven me for being the guy people copy pasted from, but it was all in good fun, and I had a lot of fun doing it. And we're gonna get to do the same thing again, all over again with this new meta.
Yeah, no, and yeah, even like something like I've even been looking at if Sultai Show and Tell is kind of the deck to attack. A lot of their anti-hate is a replicate, so it might make sense to run 4 mana value or higher permanents as hate, right? As just kind of
Yeah,
tech to like dodge that, which usually we didn't need. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting space to work with for sure. And I think the Show and Tell list is probably going to stay the same because they've had good results and they've like kind of had a good established 75. That I think it's set up well to like you can really start experimenting with spec builders. So yeah, it's super sick. It's super sick.
yeah.
Format seems to be in a great place right now.
We weren't recording the podcast right now, I would absolutely be searching Scryfall or Arena for a 4 mana Archon of Emeria effect. I gotta get looking
Yeah, no,
after
yeah,
we
yeah.
jump off.
I mean, because even if it doesn't, if it's not good in like play, if you get someone once on ladder, it feels super sick.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's nothing
Yeah,
better than making a show and tell player lose.
absolutely. Well,
Oh, we're being mean.
there could be better things. There could be better things. Who knows?
Our poor viewers.
But yeah,
Some of them like show and tell.
yeah. I mean, I like show and tell too, but it is it's the big guy on the block right now. We gotta go after
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. It's the villain of the format, just like Energy was for a while. So we got to figure out how to knock it down a peg.
Yeah, definitely. I think the format is in a better place for having. Marty was just so flexible and the card quality was so good that I think it was a lot harder to attack. And so I don't mind having a meta where show and tell is number one right now. And because it is a bit more polarizing, I think there are more interesting ideas to experiment with than like, okay, how do I beat Guide Pride? How do I that also has like Juggernauts and Thoughtseizes.
Yeah, even though Show and Tell is built to beat hate and sideboard cards, it is something that you can interact with at the end of the day. Whereas against energy, there's like only one energy hoser that exists, Sun Cleanser, and it's a card that does like literally nothing else, and they will just Swords to Plowshares it. So, eh.
Yeah, I think it's interesting not having energy on top. So yeah, we'll see. I think format's really good. Really excited to keep brewing. Looking for rank reset tomorrow, I think.
Oh yeah, well nothing ever happens. Energy will be back on top by the end of the month. Don't worry.
Okay, all right.
All right, Grease. I think that's
Yep,
about
yep.
it for this episode, unless you want to talk a bit more about stats.
No, I think we're in a good spot. I think this is a good point to end on.
All right, great. Thanks for listening, everybody. Feel free to contribute in the Discord and let us know like what you're building moving forward. If that you picked up any of these decks and played with them, let me know. Let me know what your sideboard cards are, how you're approaching this meta, and I will see you on the next podcast episode.
See you guys.